All right, let's talk about something we've all been through. You're in the zone, deep in your code, your AI assistant is just doing its thing, and then suddenly, nothing. It just stops working. Well, today we're putting on our detective hats. We're going to crack the case of a misbehaving Amazon Q developer by treating it like a full-blown mystery that needs solving. So let's get this investigation started.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll survey the scene of the crime. Then, we'll figure out how to unlock our case files, and by that, I mean the logs. We'll do a quick sweep right inside the IDE, and then we'll take a much deeper dive in the forensics lab with the command line. After that, we'll check out a lineup of the usual suspects, and finally, figure out when it's time to call for backup.
You know, every good investigation starts with a problem. You're just trying to get your work done, but your main tool, Amazon Q, has gone completely silent. And yeah, it's frustrating, but it's also the very first clue that our investigation is officially underway.
So, where do you even begin? I know it's tempting to jump straight to the most complex, wildest theories, but just like any good detective, the very first step is to just check the basics. Rushing in without a plan, that's a surefire way to get sent down the wrong path. Think of this as the first sweep of the scene. Are the lights on? Is the front door unlocked? Check your internet connection, make sure your credentials are still good, see if maybe an update is pending, and of course, try the old classic, turn it off and on again. You would be absolutely amazed at how many cases get solved right here with just these simple checks. Okay, so if the basics don't crack the case, it's time to open up the case file. In our world, that case file is the logs. This is where every single action, every attempt, and yup, every error is carefully recorded, just waiting there for a detective like you to find the clues. We have two main places to look for these clues. In your IDE, whether it's VS Code or JetBrains, you get this really handy Show Logs button. Perfect for a quick peek. But for the really good stuff, the deep evidence, we need to head over to the command line interface, where the super detailed logs are stored right on your local machine. Now, before we go any further, a huge word of warning. This is like the golden rule of handling evidence. Your logs can and often do contain sensitive data. I'm talking file paths, bits of code, maybe even account IDs. You have to handle them with care and be really, really cautious about who you share them with. All right, let's start with the easiest method. We're going to get a quick look at the logs right from your IDE. Think of this as getting the first statement from a witness who was right there at the scene. It's fast and easy. And it really is this simple. It's just 4 steps. You open the chat panel, you click the Show Logs button, you click OK on the warning about sensitive data, and then boom, your File Explorer just pops open right to the log file. No digging around required. Now, the key here is not to read the whole file line by line. I mean, a good detective doesn't read the phone book, right? They look for a specific name. You're going to scan for keywords, things like error or fatal. Look for any clues about authentication or network problems, or maybe errors tied to a specific feature you were just using. This is how you find your first real lead. So what if the IDE logs don't give you a clear suspect? Well, then it's time to head to the forensics lab. The command line interface logs are where the most detailed, granular evidence is hiding. This is where we go from having a hunch to getting the hard facts. First things first, you gotta know where the lab is. This slide is your map. Depending on your operating system, whether you're on macOS, Linux, or Windows, the logs are stored in a specific temp directory. Just use these paths right here and you'll find your evidence locker. Inside that folder, you're going to find 2 really important files. Think of chat.log as the building security footage. It's tracking all the system-level stuff like networking and authentication. Then you have qchat.log, which is more like an interview transcript. It covers the application itself, like the chat logic and user interactions. The key thing to remember is you often need to check both to get the full story. So this all builds into a pretty standard procedure. To get the best possible evidence, just follow this workflow. Find the directory, then run the chat command with maximum verbosity. That's what the little VVV flag is for, to make sure you capture every single detail. Then, and this part is crucial, you reproduce the error. Finally, you can examine both log files for your clues. And just like in a real investigation, not all evidence is created equal. Your log entries have a hierarchy. You should always start your search with error messages. These are your smoking guns. Warrant entries are like persons of interest. Info just gives you some background context, and debug is what you use when you need to bring in the full forensics team for a deep dive.
Okay, now that we know how to gather all this evidence, let's look at some common cases. Think of this as our rogues gallery, a lineup of the usual suspects you're going to run into, and, more importantly, how to deal with them quickly. First up, let's clear some innocent bystanders. You might see log patterns like these and think, aha, I found the culprit. But things like a rec error closed or an error equals interrupted are often just normal. It could be a server shutting down properly or just you hitting Control C. These are false leads, so don't let them throw you off the trail. Now these, on the other hand, are your actionable clues. If your chat.log is yelling about authentication failures, the solution is usually simple. Your credentials probably expired, so just run qlogin. See a connection timeout? That's pointing you straight to a network issue. These are the open and shut cases you can solve right on the spot. But what happens when the trail just goes cold? You know, even the best detectives sometimes need to call for backup. If you've followed all the evidence and you are still completely stumped, it's probably time to bring in the experts. When you file that support request, what you're really doing is handing over your case file. And to get the fastest resolution, you want to make it a good one. Include the relevant parts of the logs, and remember our golden rule, remove sensitive info first. Give them context, tell them when it happens, and list the exact steps to reproduce the problem. A well-prepared file gets solved a whole lot faster. So there you have it. You're not just a developer anymore. You're an investigator. You've got the tools, you've got the techniques, and you have the mindset to figure out pretty much any issue that comes your way. You know how to read the clues and follow the evidence. So the only real question left is, what mystery are you going to solve first?